I'd like to turn the portion of this program over to Slangston Hughes and a group of extraordinary artists from Do More, Baltimore, where they will present and then, after presentations, engage in a panel discussion. And please, if you have questions, please post them. Let me turn it to you, Slangston.
Hey, how you doing? What's going on? My name is Slangston Hughes. I'm the artistic director for Do More Baltimore. And so very quickly before we start the poetry portion of the day, I just want to give you some prompts on how poetry participation happens. Because spoken word poetry is not like a golf match where it's like very polite and you have to, no. It is very much a participatory activity. So there are some really exciting ways that you can participate and be engaged in the performance. I will demonstrate. There's like 3 different levels. Level 1 is the obligatory and sometimes stereotypical snaps. Yeah, everyone snap. Kind of makes it sound like it's drizzling. Drizzling praises on the poets. But then there's another level where something really hits you deep in your soul. You can make what's called the sweet chocolate sound, as if you just had some really good chocolate or some well-seasoned chicken. Everybody just go, Then the level after that is like if it just hits you in your body so hard that's like you don't even know what sound to make at first, you do something called the awkward giraffe. Just like this. Just like, I agree. And then after you come to your vocal senses, then you add, yes. Then there's a bonus level beyond that. Like if something just blows you into another time period, and like the ancestors jump out and celebrate with you, you can scream the name Jesus, but in a way where you pronounce it with an S instead of a J. And it sounds like Jesus. So on 3, everybody just do a Jesus. 1, 2, 3. Jesus. Exactly. So with no further ado, I'm going to bring to you, Do More Baltimore is a literary nonprofit that uses art, specifically poetry, as a catalyst for social change by giving youth a voice to tell their own stories in Baltimore and abroad. And so today, I have the privilege to introduce to you the world-renowned and award-winning, nationally known, but always locally engaged Baltimore City Youth Poetry Team. So give it up for the Baltimore City Youth Poetry Team.
I stay woke, daylight.
The sunken place is a safe space. This love treats you good, gives you a new home inside your own body. Become a refugee in your own psyche. What the healer did you expect? Chris, you weren't the first and you won't be the last. Like Henrietta Lacks, your cells will last forever, and our cells will last forever. We've been using your bodies for the advancement of white people the minute you stepped off that ship.
Put away my pride.
We take savage, make it proper. We take potential, make it prosper. Now think.
If you want it, yeah, you can have it.
you from this marginalized institution. Your body is bound to the click of a teacup. Your blackness is the heaviest burden you've ever had to carry. Your mind is trapped, and there ain't no getting out.
Now stay woke. Niggas creeping.
He gonna auction you off to the highest bidder. The Tuskegee syphilis study was just the beginning of a massacre for generations. This feels like deja vu. Will impose a false religion on you, then try to pray for you. Your culture's been vaccinated. You found salvation, congratulations. Thank you for your contributions. Your genealogy generates greatness for the taking. Isn't imitation the best form of flattery? This love is a self-replicating parasitic suggestion, selling you back into the sunken place. Ben Carson, Miss America, Kanye West, Steve Harvey, Grichette Michelle, I see you. Dressed to oppress, tie you down, movementless, so silent you can't hear the change in their voices. Sacrifice your sanity for money and comfort. You're crazy like PTSD, like post-traumatic slave disorder, like a performance for a racist inauguration, like an anti-black speech from a black artist. Ah! Get out! Get out! Get out! I see a teacup. The sunken place ain't a safe space for me. The TV screen makes me want to scream. I've seen the caged bird escape and sing freely, and I think it's about time I do the same. Get out! We got cotton stuck in our ears. You can't wash our brains with your BS. The sunken place is a glass face that my hammer fist can't wait to break. Get out! My shotgun got Shakur shells. Asada cells lives through all black bodies, and they feed on uprisings. This race war will end when I'm free to be African and American. It's not synonymous with the assimilation of my skin. I'll murk you before you murder me for my melanin. Get out! Get out! Get out!
Don't you close your eyes.
Black people are the aliens of this earth. When others see us, they wonder what this creature is doing, occupying the same space as them, what its purpose is. From ivory to onyx, we come in unimaginable colors. We are the start and take the shape of every ethnicity, but our actual existence goes unnoticed to the public. You see the way they portray us in the media as the destroyer of man set to take over the universe. The way they tell people, be afraid of us. Hide your children from these hideous monsters like our bodies themselves are weapons of mass destruction. Hands up. Careful not to set off the bomb inside us. You can still see humans explode when we exert confidence like we aren't allowed to walk among society. Our existence sparks debates. Politicians keep bringing up alien on alien crime like when an alien kills another alien, it doesn't end in a life sentence, but when a human kills an alien, it's justified and protected like the creature didn't move fast enough or the creature moved too quickly. It's scary. When they dissect us, they expect to find anything but natural organs like there's something in us that makes us jump higher or run faster when sometimes the only thing we're powered by is fear. Black people are the aliens of this earth. The gentrifiers want to make it seem like E.T. ain't already home, like ancient aliens weren't building civilizations before everything else was created, and Ebonics is just space talk to them. We speak and they ready to call the FBI. They tie us down and want to know all our secrets. Our secret is called connection. Us aliens have a way of spreading this to each other without breaking the tie. Yes, some of us may stray, but at the end of the day, we are still just the aliens of this earth. No, we are out of this world. They call our hair unidentified flying objects because they never seen something defy gravity so beautifully. We gotta tell them that UFO actually stands for unbelievably fantastic origins. Why else would our hair take the shape of roots? Mother Nature is our mothership. We hold the future in our afros, the past in our souls, and our presence is a present to the present. Accidentally abducting the rest of the planet into our culture. They take our features and call us foreign, but we make foreign look so good that they're right. We're aliens. And they want to take us down, so I guess now it's alien versus predator. Now it's time to stand our ground and start the invasions humans have been waiting on. Take us to your leader. Actually, it's Donald Trump, so we'd rather stay away from your leader. We need someone that knows our lives matter, that know we don't wear this blue as a gang sign. It's more like Superman. No, there ain't no kryptonite. There's just us aliens, blessing the Milky Way with our melanin and creating a new world so that younger aliens won't feel as afraid as we do. Black people are the aliens of this earth, but don't worry. We ain't gonna burn this planet down yet.
Thank you.
I've written an ode to the wondrous world of white boy magic. A thing so full of fantasy, it might as well be fiction in the first place. But this magic be hidden in the plainest of sights. So let me tell you a story about the wizard himself. Once upon a time, this ugly ass, fetus made out of mucus ass, fluorescent marshmallow ass, extra strength hecky bag looking ass, little boy in my school, loved to call me nigger. His hard R like a magical pirate that somehow never dies, like the ghosts of pirate ships don't still haunt the mid-Atlantic, haunt the middle of the hallway of my white-ass school. So the faculty falls Captain Hook, Line, and Sinker, and somehow, little white boy still manages to shapeshift himself back to the victim, like he turns Harriet Tubman to Harry Potter. With the wave of a wand, he can just will history away. And I wonder why he even bothers to mix with muggles in the first place.
It's as if he only comes to pull our culture from under our feet as if it were a flying carpet. Our way of life traveling from ancestors' hands to art museums.
Then white boy has the audacity to quiz me on African artifacts.
As if my history didn't disappear from textbooks, disappear from records. There's not enough research in the world that can have me ready for a test with stolen answers. Chad can clap on beat for 10 seconds, and everybody screaming, white boys evolving! Into what? A Pikachu? But only wizardry can explain how Hunter's thin straw hair can be spun into golden dreadlocks as if he were Rumpelstiltskin. Then he says, well, my black friend is okay with it.
Austin, pulling your black friend out of the hat to hide your racism is the oldest trick in the book.
And we aren't falling for it. But ain't that white boy magic making black bodies bend at the sleight of a hand?
Taking us apart and telling the audience it's just an act. Like his hair is not the only thing with a special power. Not defying gravity, because he can suspend himself in the air way before he'll ever get suspended from my school.
Like making a prison sentence shrink in the blink of an eye. Like becoming invisible to corner store employees or airport security.
Or, you know, the police.
Like somehow operating to a top university before affirmative action. White boy better not try this African. Me botre diasit.
Translation, I'll whoop your ass. Shouldn't you be in Narnia? Shouldn't you be at Hogwarts or something? Shouldn't you be slithering into Slytherin?
Committing some Order of the Phoenix type crime and whatnot, because I mean,
continuing on as we are, ain't no child like you gonna be the boy who lived for much longer.
White boy, you wonder how we get our hairstyles every week? Well, come here, Chris Angel, you're in for a treat. Catch this. Grab the banana clip, add a track of bullets, and call it an extension. Jake Paul, he could get it too. Watch me use voodoo to make you do your own conviction. Cause what's white wizardry to a black goddess? I gave you power. Drew chalk lines in the stars and created constellations. You drew blood to stop bloodlines and created the Constitution. But for real though,
What is white boy wizardry to a beating from a black girl?
thank you, that was a poem.
How hard would it be to find Nemo if he were as dark as the ocean floor? There are too many other fish in the sea to see him suffocate, and I've been told we all look alike, so how hard would it be to find Nemo amongst the rest of us? How hard would it be to find Black Nemo? 'Cause Sally can sure as hell sell seashells by the seashore, but you can be sure a nigga like Nemo can't sell cigarettes without assassination. Call it finding Eric, because of course you can't breathe when you're drowning. How can the rest of us just keep swimming when we were already fish out of water to begin with? Out of wishes, out of ways to wade in the water so we don't wave our freedom goodbye, 'cause I feel like currently it's a Black Nemo still lost in the tides from, let's name the species, to trapped in a tank in like 3 scenes. How hard would it be to find Black Nemo still dog paddling through the school to prison pipeline? Ain't no way to be more Pacific about the Great Barrier Reef, keeping my people from succeeding if Nemo was black. Would his father even know he was lost to begin with? Would Black Marlin ever stick around the sea to see his sea men be men? Would he follow in the flippers of almost any black father and be clownfish? Be clown, be too lost for finding Nemo. Maybe that's why so many black boys are falling off the deep end. How hard would it be to find Nemo's bones alone disintegrating in a predator's stomach? Because I'm a nice shark, swims right off a great white president's or a great white police officer's tongue too easy, because body cameras ain't waterproof yet, because shark tails are the only parts you ever see come to the surface. So of course they never reflect the truth, because America be Shark Week on repeat. If man is 70% water, how hard would it be to find Nemo within ourselves before his life goes down the drain? And no, all drains don't lead to the ocean, kid. All drains lead to sewage, lead to a storm of very Pacific proportions. And I wonder how hard would finding Nemo be then? Great White Shark says, fish are friends, not food. I reply, with friends like these, who needs anemones? Thank you. October 31st. Dear God, this can't keep happening. Been hung in chains so many times, but never high enough to reach you. But it seems like even you can't stop the madness in this world.
Our brains are target for massive sick games. They call it operation. And even though he has not touched me, it feels as if my vocal cords have been ripped from my throat like surgery. Feels as if I'm under anesthesia.
Constantly numb to the ropes and whips. A gift would be to feel my soul again. Ties up like presents they present to their family. objects to be bought and sold till there's no more values left. And we got no values left, running for my life just to steal a piece of bread for my babes, letting white men strip me on the stand in front of my husband just to keep the children safe.
Even mothers, daughters, fathers, arms grasping to getting bought as if our lives aren't worth a second trip.
We tripping over sticks and stones as if massa won't break our bones when they catch us. Sending dogs and guns like nigga catching is a sport. April 4th.
God in heaven, we have to get a boat.
Not a chance in hell I steps on a boat again. They sail us here by the harbor in Baltimore.
In Libya, they smuggle our bodies by the seashore.
Our lives hanging in the balance of the water. We ain't ever gonna know where the waves is taking us. They keep finding value in the vulnerable.
Picking apart Africa like vultures do corpses, except they don't know how rich the motherland is.
How rich she is. They claiming her as an exclusive possession, gentrifying gold to dirt.
Boardwalks to us is just walking the plank.
And somehow white allies wearing eye patches on both eyes. Either you are too, or God, or you must be blind. Slave narratives are more like motif than myth. The same repeating theme. Dear God, it's June 19th, yet we still ain't free. There are no more waters left to wade in. These tides and these tears have dried on their own.
I was told that if I write to God, he may respond. So I hope this letter reaches you in time before my time to meet you comes.
Black holes have been explored better than black souls because white stars take the light we once had and make us nothing. How can we forget our history?
When they are current events.
It was 1808.
It's 2018.
God, I guess the message missed you. But we'll keep leaving them. Wade in the water.
Why find it hard?
Wade in the water.
Why find it hard?
God's gonna trouble the water.
Wildfire. After the verdicts. Wallet. Holding a toy gun.
Loose cigarettes.
Legal firearm. Failing to signal at a lane change. Selling CDs.
Running.
Breathing. Existing. Crazy how you know what this piece is about before we even said any names. How you know autopsy before autobiography. No death before deliverance. The fire is rising, no matter how many videos they view. White people won't change their views. Guess the only views black people can have are at a funeral.
Can't sell CDs without recording the soundtrack to Black Death. Don't have to smoke cigarettes to have them kill you.
Can't play with a toy gun when you're old enough to be shot by a real one. Tamir Rice, age 12, forward authored by 12 bullets. His story lived longer than he did. The fire is rising, and no amount of tears can bring them back, and no amount of voices can give them back. We give our 2 cents, police rob us of our innocence, so that's why we have to watch what we say. The fire will speak for us.
Philando Castile's daughter won't know justice in exchange for her trauma. Instead of daddy-daughter dances,
she will waltz with the memory of her father who once was, haunted by gavels that sing out acquittals in place of accountability. Her mother's tears burning in our hearts.
Richard Collins III was a soon-to-be Bowie graduate who was fatally stabbed by a well-known racist. I guess college don't really save niggas. There is no way to survive America when prejudice is in every board meeting, revolution in our DNA. All we know is how to fight in a dark world that hates dark skin. This fire in my throat is the light, and it's mine.
Tired of you stealing our sons. Ironic, white people are the black hole sucking up all the lights.
Black people can't have nothing to ourselves, not our freedom, not our property, not our culture, not our lives, not even our deaths. We coming for you.
But since black skin will make you a threat in the flesh, this a promise, and no change will change our body's currency. So currently, we're bankrupt on F's to give. Hate that whites are getting cheese off our bodies, so I load up the Mac and fill them with shells. Remember what we said last time? This is what happens when the youth fire is back. Well, this fire is black, ever white ally. This black fire gonna burn the white lies aside to your non-existent list.
After protest, we done with this ish. The unrest has reached its peak in Baltimore. We don't just speak with heat, we let it burn.
We're gonna find you and burn your city down.
Wildfire!
Thank you.
We need like 2 seconds for setup. Hold up.
All
hold up.
right. One more time for the Baltimore City Youth Poetry Team. So real quick, going from me over towards the left is Ajua Baidu, Kima Flight, Delicia Green, Marin Wright, and Crayliani. So, poets, audience, are you ready for the panel portion of the proceedings in correlation with our poetic portion? So, I really hope you guys are ready because I believe I have prepared some doozies of questions, yes.
I like these. That's cool.
And where is my time checker assistance? I got you. Thank you. All right, so real quick, first question. Anyone can take this first. This one's easy. It gets harder as it goes along. In what ways do you see art, and specifically poetry, informing social justice and activism?
Let's go left to right. Oh, you already have a mic. Yeah, left to right.
All right. So, in what way do we see art?
Informing activism, specifically poetry.
Well, art has a really specific way of reaching the people. There are things that you can't say in like an academic setting, in a lecture hall, and then you can go on like 92Q and hear it from somebody else, and you'll say, wow, that's cool. So I find that art can help increase perspective. Yeah, that's my view on things.
Oh, no, go ahead, yeah. Go. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So,
Grab any one of them. There's so many. Just
okay. So I feel as though like now, like as I think we're millennials. We might be millennials, but like
we're Gen
yeah.
X.
Well, with like Twitter and like Instagram and everything we have, and like you can pay for McDonald's with your phone before you even get there. Like I feel like we're getting lazier, and we're not paying as much attention. So I feel like poetry, if you can grab someone's attention with it from the first line, then you can keep their attention and they will actually understand, and you can turn your pain into something pretty and have them actually get it instead of just like
yelling at someone until they change.
Or not.
I go next? Okay. So I'm a firm believer in the law of attraction and speaking things into existence. And if anybody has ever heard of the Bible, and you read like the first couple of verses, it will say God created light, and that's the first thing he created. But in my opinion, the first thing he created was spoken word, and he spoke things into existence. And so I feel like if we speak about how there are so many injustices going on in our communities, going on in our neighborhoods, in our streets, in our homes, someone will actually listen, someone will actually care. And the fact that we're so young and we can articulate in this manner is a gift from God. So, yeah.
So I would like to say that the way art has a special place in everyone's heart, whether people would not think so. Like, you might not have a favorite artist, like a painter, but of course someone has a favorite musician or a favorite actress or a favorite dancer or something along the lines of that. And art invokes individuality and being able to think with your own mind and be confident thinking the way that you do, because nowadays we all have gotten comfortable thinking with the common mind instead of being, you know, your own self. Now being weird is like, yeah, like being weird is new cool, but not in the way weirdos really want it to be. So with art, it's showing, it gets a bunch of people to come into one space that loves the same thing from different walks of life. And that's all art, activism, what we're trying to do is to get the conversation started and get things working, because we all know the world ain't pretty right now. I mean, let's come on, like, come on, we all know. So art and activism definitely go hand in hand in a beautiful way.
Okay, good segue question connecting to what you just said, and I'll start with Kima on this one. But in your work, is activism or artivism, as we say at Do More Baltimore, the primary prevailing theme? And when writing, does your topic or chosen issue you choose to tackle come first, or does the poem come first and then end up shaping and catering the chosen issue later on in the writing process? Deeper question.
Yeah, that's a hard question to think about. For me, it definitely depends, because sometimes I don't know about an issue until like someone tells me about it or I see it on the news or things like that. So until I find about that issue, like for example, the Libyan slave trade, which is a poem that we just did, I didn't know about the Libyan slave trade until February of this year. So and I found that out through news and things like that. So I wasn't inspired to write any poetry on it because I didn't know about the issue. So I feel like it depends on whether art or the issue comes first. I feel like art should come first, because then the issues can be tackled, because, you know, art inspires, like Cray said, it's a common ground for people. So when we bring people together in these spaces and things like that, we can inspire more activism. So it's so art tends to come first, just because that's the main way we can grab people's attention. You know, if we don't do poetry, we don't do art, we don't do these murals and things like that, how else would people know? How would people know about Freddie Gray if they didn't have the big mural of him? You know, how do we, you know, without things like this, I guarantee that there's a few issues that we brought up that people didn't know about here. So I believe, in my opinion, I think art does come first, just because when art comes first, we can inspire many more people to come together and then tackle the issues. So, yeah.
You can go. I was just going, I'm not going to forget, I promise. You can go.
What'd you say?
I'm not going to forget, you can go.
Oh, okay.
We don't have time for rock, paper, scissors.
This was actually something I didn't realize until literally a week ago when I talked to Jacob Mayberry, otherwise known as Black Chakra, at our last practice. Yeah, buddy. I think y'all know. And he said it was about something that really happened to me back in February when I lost someone I loved. And he said that don't rush it, because the poem is like renting space in your mind. and that can take a long time. It can take years. And that's why I think that art comes first. Because when I lost this friend, I wrote her eulogy first and then made it about homophobia second. Because in writing it, I didn't realize that homophobia took a part in her death. So art opened my eyes to an issue I didn't even see in something that happened to me. Like, that's why I think art comes first. And then activism is a really, really close second.
So I think when writing a poem, art does come first because it's your passion, it's your foundation of the entire poem. You can't build a house without foundation, it's gonna fall. What is me writing about Freddie Gray or Philando Castile gonna do when I don't really care? I'll just be saying words, hoping someone will listen with no passion. But when people hear the passion behind your pain and behind the poem, and they can hear the pain and they can see it in your eyes when you look at them, they know that it came from somewhere very deep and personal. So that's all I want to say. The art is the passion.
Magnificent, magical Einstein-Rosenberg bridge to my next question.
Wonderful.
And I'm going to start with Lovey, AKA Marin Wright, who is, as of 2 weeks ago, Baltimore's new Youth Poet Laureate. So, with that being said, do you believe that the political is personal, and if so, how and why?
Well, I'm gonna answer that with a story. Oh boy. White Boy Magic, the poem that we did like a couple minutes ago. So I go to, the school that I go to is Carver Center for Arts and Technology in Baltimore County, and it's in Towson. If I'm gonna be honest, it's a pretty white school. And so the boy, so the boy who that poem is about, we were not allowed to talk about him or call him by name or talk about what consequences he's supposed to get or anything like that. And I feel like that issue of equity in education, that's what forced it to become personal for me, because it was he had been doing it for years and nobody ever stopped him, and it was very upsetting, and it took me quite some time to get over the blind rage and then turned it into similes and metaphors and a performance. And I do think it's very personal. There's some things that you at some points you just get tired of things like police brutality and homophobia. It just makes you real angry. It makes your nerves tight. And yeah, I definitely think it's personal.
What was the question again?
Is the political personal, and if so, why and how?
Is the political personal? Political aspect of you're talking about
The police brutality, things that happen.
Anything.
All right, I was making sure, sometimes we read stuff the wrong way, but okay. Definitely the political is personal. I remember, I'll do a story as well. Thanks,
We
love.
love stories. It's what we are, storytellers.
I know, right? So, in my high school, I went to Woodlawn High School.
I did too.
And if anybody, see, there we go. Yeah, I appreciate y'all. Whenever we say that, it's
Woodlawn
kind
in
of
the
like a
building.
bad omen that follows you. You feel me? But no, I did go to Woodlawn High School, and that school taught me a lot more than the teachers. You feel me? Education still is a problem, you guys. If anybody want to put it into their officials, we need to pay our teachers better, do that. But that's not what I was getting at. It was my senior year, And a lot of stuff happened senior year, but I do remember that was the year in 2016, I believe, Freddie Gray was murdered, and
2015.
2015. Ooh. Well, it was in my senior year. Okay, so I didn't know how to feel. I remember seeing the riots on TV, and I remember I was telling my little sister, like, yo, you need to watch this, figure out what's going on outside your door. And my mom was just like, no, she don't need to see that. Why does she need to see that? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, okay, Ma. So instead, I was just like, you know what? We're going to do a protest in the middle of the hallway.
Remember that.
And it was very successful. I was threatened to get suspended for doing the protest, you feel me? But I walked across that stage a couple months later, so it didn't even matter. Thank you. But yeah, it's very personal. It's time to take action, is what I was shown. That's all.
Okay, hold the mic in your hand.
Okay.
Don't put it down yet.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna start this one with you, Crayliani, AKA Summer Nights,
How you doing?
who is the team captain.
Hey.
As a poet and person,
I am. People forget that part. I am a person, you feel me?
so as both poet and person, how do you see yourself within the context of America, as an American, quote unquote, in the society and in the structure of America as we see it today and where you see it going tomorrow?
Okay, so time to be a millennial or a Gen X. So I was on Twitter one day, right? And I seen my fellow teammate, Delicia Green, tweet something, and it resonated with me, like, seriously. And it said, and I quote, "America's gonna hate my black ass."
I was just about to say something about that.
And I was just like, you know, that's gonna be very real, because I'm the person that's ready for change, and I don't believe we are a red tea for change. Like, we had Obama in office, kind of made a couple people mad, so, you know, they were just like, you know what, forget it. We'll put Trump. Now they regret it. Should have listened, but okay. It's time to start the change, and it's time to do it now, and we are so stuck in our ways, and I know, I like progression, so yeah, America's gonna hate my black ass in a couple years, and I can't wait. I cannot wait.
So, I believe we have 5 minutes before we do audience questions, correct? Oh, just general. Oh wait, are these the audience questions right here? No, I don't think so. Are there audience questions?
Huh?
Is that a thing?
Y'all got
I didn't-
I was told I was going to receive audience questions here.
That was a Tupac
loud?
for receive.
Is that? Okay, cool. No audience questions yet. Okay.
Do we
Bonus question that just fell out of the ether.
Okay.
Or audience question first. Audience question.
I like audience questions.
Thank you. I'm just moved. I've been an English teacher for 22 years. I have a master's degree.
No, English
But
is hard. She ain't lying. That's
all
like the
of
hardest
you
language.
have just educated me. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you
We
for
have a question
educating
back
us.
there. We got
Definitely.
a question. We have a question. Someone has a question.
Okay.
Oh my
Up
God.
there,
they're
right there. Yes. Don't disrespect sis.
Say it as loud as you can.
She got the hair popping. What? Come through. What's your leave-in conditioner? I'm gonna need to know.
I love black
I'ma need to
women.
know.
We love black
I
femmes.
might be bald, but you know the waves gotta be on swim. You feel me?
Okay, wait. Time. We have 47 seconds. I'm going to let Ajua Beju jump on that first, who is first generation Ghanaian.
Mia Ganani.
Yes.
Hey, what's up, sis? I see you. What's good? What did you?
Hey, okay, great. I feel like unification of the diaspora, someone told me that the only difference in black folks everywhere is where the boat dropped us off.
Taking that line.
So I feel like the unification of diaspora is something that I feel like is definitely needed. However, I find that a lot of like African Americans, and I'm using this just for theoretical sense, take the portions of continental African culture they like the most and just cut it into something that doesn't even resemble what I see when I go back home, and then still call me African booty scratcher, still ask me if I have AIDS, still ask me if my family lives in a hut. Like, sweetheart, you can't wear a dashiki and then say that I'm primitive, huh? And since when was being primitive a bad thing? So I feel like the unification of diaspora is definitely needed, but shouldn't sour into basically appropriation.
All right. So that is our time. Thank you very much for having us. If you like the way I ask questions, you'll be even more surprised when they're in poetry form. So Google me, Google Do More Baltimore, and reach out to us and come up and say hello throughout the rest of the day. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Peace.
Before this next session begins, I'd like to thank Ajoa Bedo for the musical interlude that we just had. Thank you for playing the piano. And let me turn this session over to Professor Katrina McDonald, who is the co-director of Africana Studies here at Johns Hopkins University.
Thank you, Robert. And hello to all of you. This is a magnificent day. This is one of the rarest things we've had at Hopkins, and I'm so grateful to be part of it. Thank you so much for coming. I have to give you the background on this one. This is a really exciting background we have to tell. Again, my name is Katrina Bell-McDonald, and in 1982, I was almost 20 years old, and I was taking a social movements class at the time, and my teacher was a hippie. She knew just about anything having to do with social movements of the 60s. And how dare she but ask us in the class to make our final product, the report of the remnant of a movement. Exactly is what I said. What? Kind of freaked me out, but she was dead serious. And so I drew from my Black Panther roots, because my mother had been a Panther, and I was very young at the time. I just remember people and things, but it oozed inside of me, and I had to keep my eye on it. And so I began to reread some documents and look at new things, and I stumbled upon this amazing man named John Huggins. Some of you know John Huggins from Black Panther history. He was one of 2 or 3 gentlemen at UCLA who was gunned down, allegedly by FBI interference. That story really grabbed me, but what grabbed me more is I learned that John Huggins had a wife who was in mourning, who had been in mourning. And that just really tugged at my heart, and then to also find out that she had been a major member of the party as well, I just felt drawn to that. So I began to dig to see if this woman was still about, and sure enough, having, again, gone to Mills College in Oakland, California, I thought she might be around there, and there she was in Oakland, California still. I don't remember how I found you. I called you, I think, and said, I would like to come to your home and interview you on the role of women in the Black Panther Party. And then I cringed, and then she said, okay. I'm like, what? And I was thrilled and scared at the same time. But I did go to this beautiful woman's home. She opened her doors to me, and we sat for about 2 hours or so, and she gave me the best education I possibly could have had firsthand about how the Black Panther Party was operating, particularly the word I used then were women's roles in the party. Now, I say then because I'm a good sociologist now, and we don't talk nearly as much as people's roles as we used to do. But I knew enough about sociology to listen carefully to a lot of the things she was teaching me. Well, when we decided to have this wonderful event today, we said we've got to have Black power represented. You can't have a commemoration of the 1968 era without really making sure people understood the infusion of Black power. And I said, oh God, it would be so cool to hear Ericka again. But I didn't know how to do that even 30-some years later. So I learned that her birthday was just coming up, and I was gonna try to do something real quick and couldn't, but then I saw that she was gonna be at Jeffrey's nightclub in Oakland that I frequented, and to have a party for her 70 what?
70.
70th. This woman is 70 years old. Oh, if only I looked like that. And so I had my administrator at the Center for Africana Studies send her a love letter of sorts, actually it was an email of sorts, to accompany a bouquet of flowers, hoping somehow that would catch her eye. And here she sits. And I have not seen her in 30-some odd years. This is our reunion. And what a wonderful setting, right, for this, to be able to, and for me, it's to reach back at the young woman I was and look at what new understandings I have of the Black Panther Party and Black power in general. But more importantly, I get to hear from her, kind of her reflections of where she's been. So we're gonna begin, I think we should begin honestly with the clip. Can we do that? So I recorded that interview I did with her, and I kept it on a cassette tape for 30-some odd years. I think I was afraid to listen to it because I knew I was a really bad interviewer. However, something God told me to hold it, you know? So we just recently had it digitized. And they're gonna play a little clip of it for you today just to get us started.
Society, we wouldn't hear very much about women, but that's because society is male-dominated. Certainly, of course, Black men wouldn't be putting their women forward, so to speak, because the society is male-dominated, because it is also a very racist society. Women are on the bottom rung of most everything, and Black men having been stripped, as many people have said, that their entire feeling of manhood, you know, any chance that they could get to feel comfortable with themselves, they would do so, and there wasn't a thought much about what women could do. I don't think in the Black community it's an intentional chauvinism so much as it is just conditional. And so, because it's a male-dominated society, the FBI, the law enforcement agencies, and even the CIA in later times didn't really focus on women because they assumed that women couldn't do anything. Great though. Because what happened was women ended up running the party when everybody went to prison or got killed. For instance, when my husband, John Huggins, was murdered and Princess Carter was murdered, there weren't any strong people left but women, and they ran the LA chapter. I went to New Haven, Connecticut to bury my husband, and was asked to stay there, and I ran the New Haven chapter of the party. And there were women running the party all over the country. Now, we didn't make a big thing about women only because that wasn't the point. That still is not the point. You see, the whole movement, and you call it a movement, so I'll call it a movement. But the whole, it was a struggle in certain terms, and I don't mean that, you know, in a rhetoric kind of way, but it was a very serious and constant struggle. But it was a great desire that our human rights be considered that led us to do what we did. At least I will speak for myself and for my husband and for the people closest to me. We didn't do those things because we thought it was cute. And there's something about the way the history's been written that it looks like we were all these, bold, bad-mouthed teenagers. And that's not what you may wonder, people wonder often why, I meditate. Well, see, I always did. My desire was to see that my children, in the beginning, if I had children, I didn't want them to be floundering around trying to figure out how to be in this society. And so I joined an organization that I felt would help Black people to gain a sense of themselves as human beings first. Not as women, not as men, but as human beings. Because that's what had been stripped away from us. Not our madness or our womanness. Our humanness had been stripped. And so it was that desire that led me to the party, but it was also that desire that when I went to prison forced me to meditate. It was that desire that after I left prison and began to do my work again, brought me back to meditation, and it was that desire that brought me to meet Mikulski in 1979. So it's all interwoven. Now there are some people who did it to be cute, or to find a husband, or to find a wife, or to wear a uniform, or to speak at a rally. But for the major part, the people who did this work, and it was beyond rapture changing society.
You can imagine, right, a 19, 20-year-old girl being able to hear this straight from the mouth. It was like being on Mount something in the Bible or something, right? But what does it feel for you to hear yourself talking back? Are those the same words you would speak today, or would you augment it in any way? That would be a good idea. I think I'm on. Yes, I'm on. Can you? Yeah. It's just I needed to turn into it, right? Yeah. I was asking her, hearing herself talking back at herself today, would she say anything different or add to it?
That was then, this is now. Hello, everybody. How are you? You've been listening and participating a lot today. What's your personal weather report? Sunny, low clouds. Shining bright. Cloudy with a chance of rain. Cloudy with the sun breaking through.
That's a good one.
So I'm asking that in that way so that you can think about what you are absorbing and what is going on inside you. It's not important what goes on up here. What goes on here is very, very important. And I want to say something in case I would forget it at the end. This is a great day, and what we do when we leave this beautiful room is more important than anything.
Yes.
And how we do it is up to each of us, because we are given each, in the skin we're in, with the talents and skills that we do have, whether we have a degree or 2 or 3, we can be a part of changing that which impacts our world. It is our world together. I do like that I was talking about humanity in that clip. But first, was I being clear just then? Often we come places to listen and not participate, but to do a lot of talking once we leave that room. And so if you could have an interesting self-conversation while you're here, you might be able to do more when you leave. Something is prompting me to say all of this. And I know that when the gorgeous young women were performing, I'm glad you're here to hear this. When you were performing, I'm sure that some of you were uncomfortable. But you know what I've learned over time is that discomfort teaches.
Absolutely.
Discomfort is such a great teacher.
Yep.
When your stomach's growling, it's uncomfortable, but what do you know? You're hungry. If you are upset and you don't quite know why, but you've just spent 3 hours in front of the television, turn that dang thing off. Especially if it's called news. So I just wanted to say that it is important for us to take care of ourselves, and I don't say that lightly. What I mean is to really have a conversation inside and to do that every day. Otherwise, we miss what is right in front of us to do, right at our feet, right at the person in front of us. It's not that we have to do something big that makes the news or the papers or social media. We can do a good and a kind thing. So I was happy to hear myself making sense. And because 1982, you were 20. In 1968, I was 20. So thank you for that clip, and thank you for being the young woman who interviewed me. I always, well, as long as I'm not in an airplane traveling, I love to talk to young people. I feel it's my responsibility.
And we do have that in common. I spend an awful lot of time with young people, particularly since I've been here in Baltimore. And I have learned to, want to protect them so much. Particularly now, I'm finding at Hopkins over the last year and a half, we've really had an enormous number of cases of grave depression and anxiety, coming largely, and this is largely African-American women,
Yes,
college
I know.
students.
Yes, I know.
And they are really dismayed about what the future holds, what role should they play, yada, yada. And they just said, this degree don't mean nothing. I'm getting out. We've had to pull them back in as best we can. I've spent a lot of time with young black women throughout my college career. I started at UC Davis, my PhD program in 1988. And I was fortunate enough to have been given a teaching position that year, teaching a course on the black female. And that's when I really began to draw in very close to black women, to helping them better understand their history, as the poets were pointing out, understand their energy and their power.
How about their immense beauty and intelligence?
Yeah. Because the world would say otherwise, that black women are playing or something, that we don't really have any vision or that we don't have any direction. I'm telling you, young black women are telling them they a lie. They can say it so plain for us.
Well, one of the saddest things to see is a strong voice falls silent. And I was talking to two of my dear friends, both of whom were recently, let's say within the last few years, released from 27 years of solitary confinement.
God.
The other one, 43 years of solitary confinement. Where is the humanity in that?
Absolutely.
What is the excuse? What is the reason when there are persons who commit harm who will never see the inside of a courtroom, much less a prison? And these two men I'm talking about are the kindest, most gentle, lighthearted men I've spent time with in the last year. They said that now the solitary confinement is being studied by neuropsychologists. It shows the brain is rewired. Humans are packed, we're social animals. We need one another. But one of them said that he would watch young men come in to the solitary area, lighthearted, laughing, hilarious, making jokes, and within 3 weeks, they were turned totally inward, not in a good way. And he watched it over and over and over again. Now, he had ways for taking care of himself. And I was reminded of that during my time in solitary confinement. My way was to meditate, as I said, I was forced. My husband had been killed, and I don't say it's alleged, I'm sorry, Katrina. I know that the FBI counterintelligence program orchestrated his death, and the death of Al Prentice Bunchy Carter, and the deaths of so many more. And they didn't start with the Black Panther Party, although
they ramped it up.
Yes. There is an installation that you will probably see in museums, or you might see it as an exhibit by itself. It's called Hello 1968, and it's an installation by Sadie Barnett, and it is redacted FBI documents. It's right there on paper. It's right there, it's not hidden. You can research it. You wouldn't want to, it will make you sick. It will make you sad that human beings would intentionally want to kill in that way. But as their statement of purpose said, it was to discredit, disrupt, and further neutralize. Does that word give you chills? It should. Neutralize Black liberation movements. And there was another memo that said, and we particularly want to put more operatives on the campuses to make sure that Black and white students do not work together.
That's right.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
Because what is it that has us so fearful of change? But you were going to ask me some questions, and I'm talking.
Well, I'd rather sit here and listen to you all day. I want the audience to be clear about, and I use this word role very carefully today because I'm a better sociologist at 56 than I was at 20. But the role of the women in the Black Panther Party.
Well, the role of women in all of the movements, and I want to say that we tend to put things in silos, right? It's a very Western way of perceiving the world. My mother didn't see anything disconnected from anything else. And my grandmother's, whoa, it was all one continuum.
Yeah.
So I see all of the movements as a continuum. Let's start with Harriet Tubman. Why not? We love her. Does everybody know who she is? Okay. I mean, if you didn't, that was not a judgment. If you don't know who someone is, please, you have not been informed. We have been made ignorant in some ways intentionally. There are middle and high school textbooks right now in 2018 that say that African people came to America as migrant workers.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Well, that's dangerous, though. We laugh, but that's dangerous. Because if your little grandson or your little granddaughter or your little granddaughter thought that that was true, what would that mean for the future of our country? That would mean that if there was yet another, and please don't let there be, police killing because somebody thought their gun was a taser, then there would be no context. There would be no historical memory of what went on before. And we avoid things like over-incarceration because we cannot face that history and talk about it. But Harriet said, I love what she said. She said, I freed over, well, I'm paraphrasing terribly, I freed thousands of slaves. I could free 1,000 more if they knew they were slaves. And slavery exists. Right. Who said that? Yeah? Bob Marley. We don't have to take it all the way back. Slavery can exist here. Right. That we actually believe there's something wrong with us. We call it internalized racism, right?
That's right.
But internalizing the racism can happen for people who are not people of color. Sure. That we believe the lack of human and we other. So anyways, from Harriet all the way forward to the end to slavery on paper, which didn't reach everybody, very intentionally, the ending of slavery on paper to the movements to end Jim Crow laws. Those were actually laws, if you don't know about the Jim Crow laws and how the name Jim Crow got placed on them, please research. Right. It's important for you to know. I'm speaking now especially to Johns Hopkins students. If you don't know something, look for it. You will find it. If you believe that I'm lying or exaggerating, please fact check me. But at least know the truth. It's time for the truth. It's time for us to admit. Then we come all the way through what we call the civil rights movement, which actually was, in fact, a movement for human rights. And it was Malcolm's wave. Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, said that civil rights are the rights you do under the law. Human rights are the rights you're due by birth. And that's why I was glad I was making sense when I was speaking to you, because it is about humanity. Women of the movements all the way through were the ones who held every single movement. There is a book called A More Beautiful and Terrible History. You must read it. It's written by a friend of mine. Her name is Jean Theo Harris. She also wrote a beautiful biography on the real Rosa Parks. Not that lady that we stuck on the bus. But the rebellious life of Miss Rosa Parks. But in this book, she talks about the women of the so-called civil rights movement. And right there at Martin's arm, and he talked about it, was Coretta. Mm-hmm. She was the planner. Yeah. She was the brain, the intellect, not the brain, the intellect of a lot. But do we know that? Because we see her as a grieving widow, and she was. So was I. Yeah. You've got to read this book. It's so amazing. And it doesn't take much to know that women have been written out of the movements. So there is no role for us. No. we are.
Women are you know, in recent books that have been written on the Black Panther Party, that's very obvious. That, you know, that the women of the Black Panther Party, in large part because so many of the men were falling away, either because they were dying or being in prison or whatever. But it wasn't only that. It was because the women knew their need. And they
that's right.
undergirded the party in very serious ways all along.
Well, yes, and we were very much about the community, we call them the community survival programs.
Right.
We were very much about service to community. And there are those who think that won't do very much. I still run into people who say, hi, I'm a chef now. Welcome to my restaurant.
Right.
You know what? You fed me in that breakfast program in San Francisco.
Yep.
Doctors, lawyers, politicians. Barbara Lee volunteered in all of the party's community survival programs. Who's Barbara Lee? Congresswoman. She's Barbara Lee, who speaks for me. That's her slogan. So you see, things are not so siloed. There is this wave, there's this continuum, and women have always wanted to serve. Sometimes at the expense of our own selves, let me say. It is important, women,
yes,
as well as men, but I'm speaking to women right now. Please take care of yourselves. Please sit with some other women and talk about your woundedness.
That is definitely a 31st century message, I think. To women have heard the need for this for a very long time, but I'm finding that we're starting to hear it.
Well,
that more and more women are taking the effort to bond together for the purpose of surviving the everyday trials of life.
we must. We must, because we are those who keep something moving forward quite often. The women of the Black Panther Party who are still alive laugh about, you know, how the images, the iconography, the portrayal of the Black Panther Party is very handsome men in jackets and berets, and often with guns, as if that was the Black Panther. That was not the Black Panther Party in its entirety. I never wore a uniform. I didn't ever have a gun. What does that mean? That I wasn't in the Black Panther Party? No. It meant that there was something else that I was doing.
Right.
And the guns, that's been mythologized to make us thugs and hoodlums.
Yep.
And only with the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party in 2016 did we move from being infamous to famous. It's so amazing. But the guns were not for harm. They were for defense. But the women of the Black Panther Party knew that, and defense against what? Was there something to defend ourselves from? I mean, things do not drop out of the sky. History is a contiguous and continuous phenomenon. And I remember being a little girl growing up in Washington, D.C., you know, it's around the corner, and going to North Carolina in the summer to my mother's homestead. And she would tell us stories on the drive from D.C. to the Raleigh-Durham area. She said, you know, Pastor so-and-so, he never did go into church without his Bible and his gun. And my sister and I were like big-eyed, like, why, Mama? Why do you have to go? We know why he had to have his Bible. What?
For the same reason we needed one down in Carolina recently.
Yes. But then my mother was educating us. She was saying, because you never knew who was going to come in and shoot at you in a church, that makes me want to cry to even think about the people who died in the church.
You know, I think one of the most amazing moments for me personally was when President Obama spoke at the funeral of those we lost in the South a couple years ago. And not only was I just so proud to see my president in the midst of that pain, but when he sang, see, people thought that was just cute. That wasn't just cute. That was the most passionate thing. And it resonated with my own history and what it means to sing a rich song at a funeral. You know, it just made me so proud to be a black person under a black man at that moment. It really did.
The women of the Black Panther Party also carried forward and so did the women of the Civil Rights Movement. If just for a moment, if we break them apart to pull them together, then there was SNCC and the women in SNCC, same thing. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Sorry to use an acronym that I didn't state first. So we worked in coalition. And it's hard for me to talk just about just black people, because the Black Panther Party was for, quote, in its 10-point program and platform. And if you've never read it, please read it. You will find it online in its entirety. And I'm sorry to say that the 10-point program, the simple, I want a word that's not, the simple points of that platform have not been realized. We want land, bread, housing, clothing, justice, and peace.
Basic.
But they're spelled out. So each one of the 10 points relates to many of our community survival programs. And those 10 points drew the Brown Berets into existence, prompted the Young Lords to come into existence. How many of you know who the Brown Berets were? 3 people, okay. So the Brown Berets were Chicano, Mexicano people in California. It started in California, but it didn't stop there. And the Young Lords were Puerto Rican. And we also worked with the Third World Women's Alliance, because at the time in the 60s and 70s, the women's movement was primarily white and could not handle its own racism. I'm not exaggerating.
No, not at all.
I was there. And so the Third World Women's Alliance, which was mostly Asian women, they formed a coalition with us to stop infant mortality in East Oakland.
Yep.
East Oakland had the highest rates of infant mortality, second to sub-Saharan Africa.
It's Baltimore now.
But it was the Third World Women's Alliance that worked with the Black Panther Party to bring this to the press and to change some of the policies and protocol at the county hospital in Oakland, Highland. So I want to say that coalition building is something we need now. We tend to, again, that silo thing. Black folks here, Latinos here, Asians here, indigenous people always here.
But people people really, I think.
And we worked, I'm sorry, I have to say this.
Yeah.
We worked with 3 organizations that were poor white people. Who talks about poor white people anymore? And the people that talked to them were slick, right? They talked across politics to poor white people and had them believe to vote in a certain way. Poverty is poverty. And no one in this wealthy country should be poor.
Right.
No, not like poor of heart, poor of spirit, comes from conditional poverty, living in conditions of poverty. And I grew up in DC across the border from Maryland, where little white children who didn't have shoes and had missing teeth at ages 8 and 9 would spit at me and call me nigger. And when I went home crying to ask my mother why, Mama, didn't their parents give them any home training? She would say, well, sugar, they've been taught to believe that they're poor, but at least they're not colored.
Right.
And my mother was so full of some simple truths, and I appreciate her to this day. Thank you, Cosette.
Yes.
Because that is what was true. Those little children had to be taught that.
Sure.
And their parents had to be taught that. And their parents had to be taught that. And so on, all the way back once again to slavery. Mm-hmm. By the way, there has never been a statement, a United States statement that simply is this: from the bottom of our hearts, we are so sorry for enslaving Africans. This was said in South Africa. This was said in Australia because they had the Aboriginal Act. Did you know what the Aboriginal Act was? If you don't, please research it. And also there's a movie you can watch called, what's the name of it? Anybody? The Rabbit-Proof Fence. Once again, a whole historical thing that we wouldn't know about unless we were looking for the truth in history. But that I am so sorry doesn't mean then, as I'm sorry to say it, a senator said to me once, but Ericka, doesn't that mean you're going to want money? Well, that would be good too. But how about an apology?
As a start.
How about I step on your pretty shoes and I say, I am so sorry. How about that as a beginning? And in Australia, when the apology came, the indigenous people said, this is a very good first step.
And we always need that first step in context.
It is what has us now in this broiling stew. All of us, not just black people. This is not the, quote, black problem. All of us, we're afraid to talk. And if we talk, we've become very good. Here, I have an extra bottle of water if you need. Do you? Okay. We've become very good at sidestepping. And we've also become very good at slipping quietly out of the room or derailing the train of the conversation so it becomes about something else. But if we could talk, the more we can talk, the more we can talk.
What I've discovered, I teach a course at Hopkins called Race, Racism, and Racial Privilege. Mm-hmm. And in the first couple of years I taught it, I watched as the white males in the class began to twist and turn in their seats. But what ultimately happened about 2 weeks before the class was over is one by one they would say, you know, Dr. McDonald, I think my grandfather's racist. Mm. Or you know, when I was 8 years old, I remember something.
That's because you stuck with them and you didn't make them wrong. You didn't make them wrong, you didn't make them bad.
That's something I say right on the front of any race course I teach is, you know, this ain't about me pointing you out. You know, because they can't hear anything once you do that. Once they feel that you're on their case, they can't hear you. And trust me, I want to be. But
historically, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Right.
Go on.
No, I was just saying, I just think it's important that from a teaching perspective, to get the air clean enough so we can have a conversation. I can't be calling you names on day one. You know
It's a conversation, and I don't know anybody, unless they're an immortal, who had anything to do with setting up the systems of inequity that exist right now.
Right.
No one of us is responsible for it, but what we are responsible for is what we do once we know.
Right. Right. That's good.
So we have 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, we just have a few minutes left, and I just want to raise this very simple concept because it came up in a conversation that I had just this weekend when I was in Houston giving a talk on my new book on African American marriage. I had to work with them a bit to understand the concept of womanism. You guys familiar with womanism as something akin to but not equal to feminism, which has been, promulgated by a lot of our black female colleagues. And I tried to help them understand and talk about a number of things that for a lot of black women and women of color, womanism comes from the deep need to articulate a loyalty to our men, where feminism doesn't. Feminism has no language to speak of loyalty across gender. It is about what women need, what women rights they have, and so forth. African American scholars, mainly novelists, writers that came up with this concept, 30, 40 years ago. Womanism was a way of expressing my womanness alongside my brother. And I think that's so important, particularly now when our brothers are being shot down.
Well, the women are being shot too.
And no, they definitely are, no question. But I guess my point is either way, that we're in the same condition. And if black women and black men don't understand, and a lot of them do, but we don't, and not even our literature, but other people's literature suggests otherwise. But I think it's important for all of us to move forward together. It doesn't make any sense for some of us to win and others of us to lose. If we're going to make any real difference in the world, and if we're all going to survive, we've got to move forward together.
Do we have any questions?
I hope so. Anyone have any comments or questions they'd like to share? This gentleman here.
Is there a microphone? Or should we repeat questions? Just go on and
let's see what we can do.
Say your question and I'll repeat it. You work with second graders. You're a teacher?
Well, I work through Creative Alliance, so it's like a creative, but it's also helping them with their math and English homework.
Right.
Right.
Also dealing with their emotional and other issues, so it's like that's more so stopping their learning
Yes.
than anything, basically. So, but also I noticed that it's only me and another older black teacher.
So you're talking about the lack of black male teachers. We can hear you, but I don't think everybody else can. So you don't have to say that over again. We got it. But what is your specific question so I can say what your question is before we answer it?
How do you feel that if there was more black men in the school system and engagement with young boys and young girls, how would that impact the community and us as development as people? What's that big impact? Because I don't even know.
But I think you answered your question. What is the impact of having more black and other men of color in the schools? How would that impact not only young boys, but young girls? And I can't answer your question because I got a thing saying time is up.
Well, it's like, y'all have experience, so I was like trying to figure out, but why is it so low then?
It's low because we are not seen as educators.
Right.
That's why it's low. And we need to do work to make certain that our teacher pools are full of black and brown men and women.
We have like 2 minutes, and I've got to ask this one question, and
We
it's
have no
directed
more
to you.
minutes.
We're going to do one.
Oh.
Because it says they would like to hear more of your thoughts on the struggle, not essentially reflecting aspects of gender, maleness, femaleness, but an effort to strip people of their humanity. Can you contextualize that within the heightened era of identity politics?
There,
Or maybe that's your next book or something.
I understand what I'm being asked. I'm being asked 3 different questions. And I'm also, I paused because I don't think identity politics is a term we created.
Yeah.
I understand it in a cerebral way, but my heart doesn't understand that. I feel like it's insulting if we stood a little platinum blonde boy from Northern Europe here, and we stood a little African girl from Johannesburg or Ghana right here, and then we stood a Vietnamese or Cambodian little boy here and an indigenous boy from Canada there, and we said they're all the same. That's insulting. That is insulting. That is not seeing. Where I come from, we want to see each other. It's connection. And so that's this notion of color blindness or gender blindness or sexual orientation blindness. It's lies that keep us from talking. We want to see the little platinum blonde boy and understand his culture. We want to know about him. We want to know about the little girl who says her grandmother brought her mother over on a boat from Vietnam. We want to hear that story. And it's not identity politics. No. So can I say something more in general about the movements for liberation in this country? Yes, I could say loads. But I do know that, at least in this lifetime, I'm in a woman's body.
Yeah.
And that is a particular lens through which to see the world. It's a beautiful lens, and it's endeared me to people of all kinds. But I think that, what do I want to say that is the last thing that I can say is that all of the movements for change are inspired by love. Not a single one of the movements was inspired by hate. Now, we succumbed to the hatred of those who othered us, but once we return to that love, and I wish I could quote Fred Hampton, but I don't have time, but he speaks about it so eloquently, then I know that I am doing the right thing, even if yet another challenge faces me. So I want to leave you with something.
That's beautiful.
Love is a great power.
It is.
And you can use it to transform your world. Thank you.
And I can say, can you still hear me? I can say that this woman, this incredible woman, transformed my world in that she just helped me to see what a black woman truly is. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Professor Huggins, thank you so much for making the effort to come from California. And before the professor leaves, last night when we had dinner, one of the things she talks about is she's helping social activists with the whole concept of self-care. And as the professor discussed it, so many activists, and I'm sure many of you feel in this room, wear out, wear down, or burn out. And if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of anybody else in your own family, in your own community, and certainly be able to organize to change the country. So you have multiple missions, and but we want to thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge and experience, and a special shout out to Professor McDonald, who really said, you've got to hear this. And again, Professor McDonald, we thank you for doing that. Well, it's my job now to introduce one of my colleagues, but I've got to tell you, I feel like I'm back in the Senate. When I came to the Senate, there was only one other woman there, Senator Nancy Kassebaum of Kansas. In all of American history, only 19 women had served. No woman of color had ever served. And all of the podiums came in long and lanky. No podium came in size 14 petite. So here we are back at Hopkins. So we not only got our own podiums, but we got more than 20 of us, and such rising stars as Senator Kamala Harris. But today we want to bring to the fore our colleague from the Senate, my very good friend, Senator Chris Van Hollen. Senator Chris Van Hollen is well known to many of you. He was elected to the Senate this past November, and he is a well-known advocate for social justice in our own country and also around the world. A seasoned legislator, he served in the Maryland General Assembly and in the House of Representatives for more than a decade. And then when I retired from the Senate, the seat was open, and Senator Van Hollen won this seat. He's doing a terrific job there, and he's certainly a go-getter. When I was in the Senate, I chaired the Appropriations Committee. When Senator Sarbanes was in the Senate, he chaired the Banking Committee. You pick one, and those are power committees. They're the money committees. So what did Van Hollen do? He got himself on both. You're on banking and appropriations, and we're going to count on you to work on this agenda. The theme of Senator Van Hollen's career now in the Senate is not necessarily a new deal, but certainly a better deal. A better deal where we were talking about jobs and justice, about equal justice, about equal opportunity for all. And really to say, not only to say it in speeches, but to put it in law books and in family checkbooks. So Senator Van Hollen, why don't you come up and share your reflections on this historic day with us. And we're glad to see you.
It's great to see you.
And I always say when I introduce them, may the force be with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Mikulski. And let me
You can just
start.
move the stool over.
Thanks. I got it.
You got like a little routine.
I got it.
Now, let's hit it. 1, 2, 3.
All right. It is great to be with all of you. And let me just say how pleased I am to be off of Capitol Hill today and with all of you right here at this important gathering and forum. And Senator Mikulski said, may the force be with you. And that is because I've always said that when Senator Mikulski is with you, the force is with you. And I want to thank her for all the passion and humanity she brought to her job as United States Senator. I can only say that Johns Hopkins University is very lucky to have Barbara Mikulski working with them today. And you talk about social activism and social work. Senator Mikulski, as many of you know, started as a social worker. She started at the grassroots level. She started at the neighborhood level. And she took that passion and that drive and that purpose to Capitol Hill, where she worked on so many issues important to our state and our country, issues of social justice, economic justice, racial justice. So I am glad to be here with Barbara Mikulski. And when she sort of passed the baton, one of the things she suggested was I work hard to get on the Appropriations Committee in the United States Senate, and I serve on that committee. And if you think about the appropriations process and the budget process in our country, it can get very abstract. But at the end of the day, how we decide to spend our resources in this country, raise resources and spend resources, and what we spend them on, tells us an awful lot about our values and who we are as a people, whether we're going to invest in opportunity, whether we're going to invest in economic opportunities for everybody, invest in education. And so those budget documents are reflections of our values, and Senator Mikulski always made sure, when she was in charge and had the votes, to make sure that we were advancing an agenda for people and for equal opportunity, equal justice in Maryland and throughout the country. And at this particular moment, I think all of us in this room know we have an incredible struggle going on when it comes to building on the challenge that was laid before us, or as Dr. King said, collecting on that promissory note of equal justice and equal rights and racial equality. And if you were looking for a recent metaphor for that, you may have seen that the chaplain of the House of Representatives was recently fired by the Speaker of the House, fired because his prayers pushed too much for social justice and trying to make sure that what I thought was an atrocious tax bill would actually help everybody instead of just some people at the very top, and that he had a number of prayers for greater social justice, and he was fired. So we got a heck of a challenge in our country on our hands, and I'm grateful for the chance to be with you today to reflect a little bit on the lessons of the 1960s, and I know the main focus is on the year 1968 and lessons we've learned and how we can move forward. But I want to just look at that decade for one moment, because I know you've had earlier panelists. This was a period, of course, of incredible political and social upheaval and turmoil. And out of that period sprung some very important ideas and some long-lasting gains that we need to do a lot to build on. And we know that we had, at the beginning of that decade, in the 50s and the early 60s, the great struggle of the civil rights movement. Of course, we had Dr. King's ringing speech in 1963 at the Lincoln Memorial, "I Have a Dream." We had the women's rights movement. We had anti-war protesters around the country saying that the decision to go into Vietnam was wrong. We had, in 1963, the tragic assassination of John F. Kennedy. In 1964, President Johnson, in a speech before Congress, laid out the vision for a great society and announced the war on poverty. 1967, Dr. King worked with many around the country to launch the Poor People's Campaign to fight for jobs and dignity and higher wages for everybody in the country. And then, of course, in April 1968, we saw the tragic assassination of Dr. King, followed shortly thereafter by the shooting down of Bobby Kennedy. All that in 1968. Turmoil, tension, marches, people in the streets. And what I want to reflect on for a moment is during that period where you saw incredible social upheaval and new pushes and marches for greater equality and greater justice, you also saw one of the most productive legislative agendas in the country. That combination of grassroots movement in the streets with willing partners and a majority in the United States Congress and the White House actually resulted in an incredible step forward during that decade. Not near where we want to be, but I just want to list, because I think when you hear them listed, we recognize what an incredible amount of productive legislation passed. Civil Rights Act, 1964. The same year, a dramatic expansion of food and nutrition programs, food stamps programs, now known as the SNAP program. 1965, Voting Rights Act. Medicaid, July 1965, started the Medicaid program, which today now helps provide health care to 67 million Americans. Medicare, Social Security had passed as part of the New Deal. Medicare started in 1965. Today, 55 million Americans have health care through Medicare. The Elementary and Secondary School Education Act, passed in 1965. First time the federal government said that we're going to take it on as an obligation for the country to make sure that we provide more federal funding to schools in lower income, poor areas. That was 1965. Head Start, 1965. The Higher Education Act, the first federal law to provide scholarships to help people afford to go to college and to provide student loans. That was 1965. Omnibus Housing Bill, 1965. Later that year, other legislation creating HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. 1968, the Truth in Lending Act to try to eliminate discrimination based on lending. 1968, the second Civil Rights Act, known as the Fair Housing Act, was passed, and also in the 1960s, big improvements to the coverage of Social Security. So out of all that ferment came a very productive legislative period, people demanding change at the grassroots level, and a willing Congress for the most part. And these were all battles, and presidents in the form of first Kennedy and then LBJ, who were willing partners in advancing the civil rights movement and more of a movement for economic justice. That was the part of the war on poverty, the Great Society programs. Now, if you step back today, it is clear that we did not succeed in winning the war on poverty. I mean, you look around today, both Maryland, Baltimore, the country, and we have incredible gaps in income and wealth, growing gaps in income and wealth inequality. We have structural racism in so many parts of our society. We have lots of work still to do, but it would be a very big mistake, in my view, to say that the progress made from the legislative seeds that were planted in 1960s did not do a lot of good in moving our country forward and advancing our country both in terms of more economic opportunity and more social equality, both in terms of the bills like Medicaid and Medicare on the economic security side, and of course the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, and other major measures when it comes to social equity. In fact, I raise this issue because it is part of an ongoing debate in our country, not always framed in the debate about whether or not we're going to continue to advance the New Deal that came before the Great Society or now advance the Great Society, but because so many people want to turn back the clock on progress we've made. Before I was in the United States Senate, I served in the House of Representatives. I was the senior Democrat on the Budget Committee. And before he was Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan was the chairman of the House Budget Committee. And in 2014, as chairman, he decided to have a series of hearings. And the hearings were called A Look at the War on Poverty 50 Years Later. In other words, he wanted to look at the progress or lack of progress that we've made as a result of all that legislation that I mentioned we passed, whether on housing or Medicaid or all those issues. And it is absolutely true that if we're going to define success as eradicating poverty or dealing with all the challenges we have on economic and social justice, it was not successful. But I'm going to turn to a minute to some of the progress we made, and Paul Ryan, his conclusion at the end of this hearings was that the war on poverty was a, quote, miserable failure. Now, the reality is that while we clearly have fallen short and have so much work to do, the reality is those programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, food and nutrition programs, the safety net that they provide, when you look at the facts, The reality is that 45 million fewer Americans are in poverty today than would be in poverty today, except for those important safety net programs that we've got. 45 million Americans more would be in poverty today if we hadn't enacted that legislation. And if you look at the supplementary poverty measure, which is the measure that takes into account the benefits of Medicaid and these other important programs, the reality is that poverty rate has fallen from 26% in 1967 to 14% in 2016. And the reason it's important to make that point as we agree that we've got to move forward is because we've got an awful lot of people right now on Capitol Hill who are trying to roll back the clock and dismantle the important progress we've made. And if you look at the budgets that were passed by the majorities in the House and Senate just last year, which are supposed to reflect our values, they call for very large, debilitating cuts to the food nutrition program, SNAP program. They call for a $476 billion cut to Medicare, which provides health care to seniors. They call for a $1 trillion cut to Medicaid, which, as I said today, provides health care services to tens of millions of Americans. And that's just a partial list. You've heard recently the Secretary of HUD talking about increasing the amount we charge low-income people for rent, even though we know that housing prices are going up, not down. And if you look at the budget that we've gotten from this administration in every area, it's an attack on some of the pillars that have been planted over the years, including dramatic proposed cuts to the whole portion of the budget that funds education and funds other important social justice and other programs. And so as we think of the way forward, we need to make sure that we do not allow this effort to undo the programs that we have made. And President Obama helped fill a very important gap, again, hasn't closed the gap, with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, with the passage of Obamacare. And interestingly, maybe not surprisingly, you've now seen a big effort to attack that program. And in fact, it only survived by a one-vote margin in the United States Senate just last year. But for that one vote, it would be gone. So it also underscores the fact that we all know that every single vote counts, and every vote that's not cast is a vote that is not helping advance the cause of social justice. So my appeal today, as we look back on the 1960s and 1968 in the current context, is really twofold. One, recognize that we have an ongoing battle on these fundamental issues about who we are. There are still efforts to go after the New Deal programs, the Great Society programs, an incredible amount of productivity in this decade. Compare it to today. I mean, all of that was done in a decade. This year, last 2 years, what has Congress done? It passed a tax cut that went overwhelmingly to the wealthiest people in this country and was totally unnecessary. We borrowed $2 trillion, and that's what we did with it. So I would just say, as we look forward, and there are lots of very good proposals on how we can build upon and advance on the progress that we've made in areas of social justice and economic justice, that we look back to see why was that period so productive? And my view is it's because of that combination of active ferment at the grassroots level, combined with a political moment when you had partners in the Congress and the White House, a majority who were willing to advance that agenda. And in my own experience, that combination is what is essential. When I was at college, I was very engaged in the anti-apartheid movement. And to get the United States to divest and drop its relationships with the apartheid regime in South Africa. And what we did at college was push to get the college to divest. And over time, students, and I want to just say to all of our students here, it was students who helped make that movement happen, students or who we're going to rely on in many ways to advance the next round of social change. But years later, and it was years later, you saw the United States Senate finally acting to pass national legislation to break U.S. trade and economic relations with South Africa. Began as grassroots movement, not just on campuses, but many places around the country. But that upward pressure, in the end, reached the halls of Congress where a majority passed it. And I think the lessons as I look at the 1960s is you have to have that grassroots momentum, and then you have to have enough people at the ballot box supporting people who are going to be partners in moving that important effort forward. And if you have that combination, you can have that productive efforts that we saw in the 1960s. Imperfect, certainly not the full answer by any means, but an important step forward. And we need to build on that in some incremental ways and in some radical ways. And at the same time, we need to make sure more people participate in our political system. And I'll just end with really one of my favorite sayings, which is that the world needs dreamers and the world needs doers, but most of all, the world needs dreamers who do. And if you think of Dr. King, he had that great speech, I Had a Dream, but it was a speech in the middle of a march as part of a movement that made things happen. Vision plus action, that's, in my view, the lessons of the 60s and 68, despite all the turmoil that helped move our country forward. And we need that grassroots fervor and vision and action more than ever today. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.